Actually, I think Byron could give this speech. We'll just give him a little step stool so he looks like me. All righty. So my topic today is ignorance and blessings. And I think that after I get done, you'll probably know that I'm blessed and I'm ignorant. So, but I learn. My name is Carl Skogsberg Milam, and that's kind of important a little bit later. I'm the founder of Sushi Neko and Western Concepts, and Byron asked me to speak about someone who basically gives me a lot of inspiration. And so that person, although I never met him, was my grandfather, and his name was Carl Skogsberg. So that's something that, I feel that that's a huge blessing in my life, even though I didn't get to meet him. So in the 1930s, my grandparents and my mom lived over on 39th Street. And that's not significant other than they woke up one day with a lot of commotion outside and a cross was burning in their front yard. So that was something that, as the stories go in families, it kind of gets bigger and gets smaller and so forth, but I'm pretty sure it's true. So really what I'd like to suggest today is that businesses don't get enough attribution for the benefits that they provide the community. And I really am blessed because Byron asked me to give this speech, and it really gave me an idea of what actually we've accomplished. And I don't say me, we, in that, we're a community here and we're a family, a big family, and we really do appreciate it. And our people are, we're just blessed to have them. We have 180 people in our organization. That generates literally about $4 million in both wages and tips that these people receive. So we're also blessed to have a great community that we're part of and customers, because obviously you need all three. You need a business, you need the staff, and you need the customers. And so we're extremely blessed to have all those. I guess I've already, I've got an outline, which is kind of for me, like guardrails on a highway, and Byron knows. Byron knows that I can get in the weeds pretty fast, so, and together we can really get in the weeds. So my grandfather's story, he was a son of Swedish immigrants that came to the United States in 1886, and he was born in 1894. And he lived in Colo, Iowa, and his family were Lutheran ministers. And so there was a big religious background, and he was brought up in that fashion. And so he really wanted to represent God in his life, in his actions, and I think that he did that. He was putting himself through college. I think it was Drake University, and he was a teller at a bank. And he would take deposits and so forth. So one day, a fellow came in and he owned the bakery in that town, and so he made a deposit. And my grandfather noticed the deposit slip and told the fellow, "You own the bakery, correct?" And he said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I handle most of the deposits from there, and you might want to take a look at, what's happening with your manager." So he went back to the bakery, looked through the books, and immediately fired that manager because he had been embezzling. So that fellow, Mr. Campbell, basically hired my grandfather at that very moment, pulled him out of college, and started teaching him the baking business. So where this kind of comes around is that he would troubleshoot bakeries that were having problems. So he came to Oklahoma City in 1920 or so. And so he turned the bakery around here, and it did very well. But then he got the idea that middle 20s to get local owners and local investors and himself, and then they would basically start a federation of bakeries that way. So he started it here in Oklahoma City. They raised the money. They built a brand new plant, which is on Broadway. That's the Rainbow Bakery over there, Bimbo now. So it was extremely successful. So he did that for the company all over the country. So they opened up Albuquerque, Sacramento, Shreveport, just all over the country, until a point in time when I guess the Wonder Baking Company didn't appreciate it very much, and they filed an antitrust suit against them, and so they weren't allowed to open up any more bakeries in the United States. So they went to Central America and Spain, and they opened Bimbo bakeries. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's where that came from, and which is kind of interesting because Bimbo just purchased Sara Lee and everything. So it's all kind of come around. Again, my grandfather died in 1949. So he died 11 years before I was born. And this is where it kind of comes in with the cross burning. So when he started the bakery, at that time, unionization was very strong. And he, took it to his people, and they said, no, we don't want to unionize, and it got voted down. Well, they persisted. And one of the things that this may be a little controversial, but this is what they happened to experience, my family, is that my grandfather hired basically immigrants and African Americans to work in his bakery. And he thought that's the thing that he needed to do. He's, from a Calvinist Lutheran background, and he thought that's what I needed to do. And so the unions were very tied in with the KKK. And that's where the cross burning came in. Not only that, but my grandmother was very Catholic, and so in Oklahoma back in the 20s, that was a tough place to be. But he really, he really motivates me in the fact that he would go downtown on Saturday mornings and bail out his African American workers because they would be arrested for being on the wrong side of town. So they were very loyal to him, and vice versa. And it's just a beautiful thing. So that's one of the things that really instilled in me the idea that we can make a difference by being in business. You can change people that way, change their lives. My story, this is where the ignorance comes in. So I went to school in a lot of different places, and in my travels, I love sushi. So I ate sushi wherever I went. In Africa and in Europe and so forth, and I just love sushi. And I always would just kind of take ideas from different places. And when I lived in Boulder, Colorado, I had some friends who I said, you need to open up your own restaurant and so forth. And so I was not part of that process. I had no money. And so I watched them, and I became very good friends with all the sushi chefs and the staff, and that's a long story. But when I moved back to Oklahoma City from Seattle, I said, I'm going to open a sushi bar. And that's where Sushi Neko came into being. And, this is where the ignorance comes in too. We have, when we first opened, I had a manager who was a friend of mine. I had the two sushi and kitchen staff that were friends of mine from Colorado and eventually California. And I thought, that's where the ignorance comes in, I thought all Asian people were homogenous and got along well, and this is going to be a great thing. Well, 2 weeks after we opened, my manager quit, and I was a financial advisor for American Express. I had zero restaurant experience. So I was trying to manage a restaurant, and one of the things that I had, in most restaurants, you've got the front of the house, then you've got the back of the house, and then we had the sushi portion, which was even more complicated. And then the fact that a lot of these ethnic groups just didn't get along. And I remember one evening we'd have service and a meal afterwards, after we were closed, and all the staff would sit down to, to eat. And this one young lady put her plate down at this one seat, and one of our other male staff members came up and just took her plate and wiped it off the table and said, "You don't deserve to sit here." And I was just appalled. I mean, I couldn't believe it that somebody would treat somebody that way. But what came from that is a lot of blessings as well. I lost that. It was a partner. One of the chefs that didn't tell me on their resume that they kind of had a cocaine problem. So not only did I not have a manager, I didn't have a sushi chef and a kitchen chef, and so we made do with what we could make do with. And we brought in a lot of people. Like, sushi chefs are kind of like hired guns in the Old West. They'd come into a town and do their stuff and then leave. And so we had a lot of these guys coming in, and they were all male. All of them were male, because that's Japanese tradition. So one evening, I was out of town, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I just knew something was wrong, and I called into the restaurant, and my poor assistant manager at that time was just, "I've been trying to get a hold of you forever," and I was up in Enid or something. And so he said all the sushi chefs walked out. It was on a Saturday night. And so I said, "What's the problem?" And he said, "Well, they think they didn't get enough tips last night, from the wait staff," which is part of the thing. So they were kind of a little union. They'd started their own little union. And what came from that is that we accepted all their resignations. There were like 6 or 7 people. And we said that on Monday we would consider, taking their application again. So several of them came back. But in the interim, we had some ladies that were married to American servicemen that were Japanese. And so in Japan, you're not supposed to make sushi if you're a woman. And literally that's the tradition, because your hands are too warm and will spoil the fish, or you've got too much perfume on and things of that sort. So that's their tradition. And I respect it to a point. However, they came to me, some of these ladies came to me and said, "We know how to make sushi. We had to do it in the back room of my parents' hotel and so forth, because we couldn't do it in public." But so they came in and they pitched in and helped. And after a few days, it's like, wow, they're great. And they're so much easier to deal with. But, one of the things that, one of these ladies that came in and helped us was making sushi for a Japanese gentleman one day. And she was literally in tears because she was apologizing for making us sushi. And a lot of that has changed. This is probably 18 years ago. So a lot of that's changed. And so, and part of that is because we kind of broke that barrier. I mean, you consider it a glass ceiling, but in reality, it just helped us out tremendously. We just had a need, and these people helped fill it, and then they solved a problem for us. And so that brings me to there are some things that I'm extremely proud of. I'm proud of this. I'm proud of Sushi Neko and Musashi's and the Will Rogers Theater and the Hutch and all those restaurants that we're involved in. And people ask me, which is my favorite restaurant? And I say, well, that's like, which is your favorite kid? But this is an award that we received, and it's a National Diversity Award. And we received that at the National Restaurant Convention one year. And one of our customers had written in and said that these people are making this work. And they're we had 14 languages, I don't know how many different nationalities. But one thing that we did that solved a lot of the problems is because the Thai people would talk to the Thai people, the Japanese people would talk to the Japanese people. And again, this may be a little controversial, but we had to make English our language. And that solves so many problems because people would think that people were talking behind their backs and, all those sorts of things. But so that just showed me that through the, necessity, we solved some things that we never could have otherwise, just by being in business. So I'm extremely proud of that. One of the other things that I'm extremely proud of is that we've sponsored several different people that are immigrants to this country and came in, in the normal, natural way. And so we sponsored them and they became U.S. citizens. And I really, whenever I go to one of those, naturalization ceremonies, I didn't cry, but it just really makes me feel happy because they are so excited and, it makes our country better. And I just feel that. They may not vote the way I want them to vote necessarily. I don't ask them to vote anyway, but they're genuine great people who've improved our lives and improve our country. And the other thing that I really want to mention is that there's a group called the Sparrow Project, and they take in immigrants and refugees basically. And through Catholic Charities, we just started saying, okay, we've got some entry-level jobs that we would love to, help them out. And so we started taking refugees through Catholic Charities that sponsored them. And so they started working for us, and a lot of these people are from Burma. And so I didn't think anything more of it, because I've kind of pulled back from the business lately, but I'm not on the floor day to day. And at one of our Christmas parties, which Brown Gravy DJs, a fellow came up to me and he said, one of our clients asked me to come to this Christmas party. I go, "You're one of your clients?" And he said, "Well, I'm part of the Sparrow Project, and we take, the refugees and assimilate them." And he said, "You're putting us out of business." And I said, "What do you mean I'm putting you out of business?" He said that these people come to Catholic Charities and they never hit the Sparrow Project anymore because we've hired so many of them. And, it's worked out great. There are times when I walk up and try to ask somebody something and they're like, they don't speak any English, and that's where they start. But we've had people that have started exactly that way. They came with just the shirts on their back and some, wanting to improve their lives. And most recently, we had a manager at Musashi's that started out as a server that, was going to school, learned English, became one of our managers, and he is now graduated and he is a aerospace engineer. And so just extremely hardworking people. So, in conclusion, I would say that I'm a huge U2 fan, and Bono's somebody I really look up to for all the work he's done. And he said that the best social program ever invented was a job. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've provided jobs to a lot of people. And I think I took it for granted. But after Byron asked me to, speak today, which he was very brave for having done so, because I told him I do not do public speaking, and it scares me to death. And I didn't throw up or wet my pants, so. But I really appreciate what Possibilities does and what they're, how they're trying to improve the community, and thank you all for being here, because by supporting them, you're doing just that. Thank you very much.